My son said, "You're too bitter to be around the baby." So I bitterly canceled his $300 Kelvin's tuition fund. He's bitter too, now. I stepped into the backyard, where lanterns glowed soft against dusk. Crystals hung from tree limbs, and smooth river stones were arranged in concentric circles. Around me stood wide-eyed guests, influencers in flowing linen, faces lit by candles and gentle music. They had called it a healing circle for energy rebalance, a ceremony for new life, for my grandson's future. I stood just inside the inner ring, clutching my shawl, heart slow and steady. Nathan stepped forward and picked up a silver microphone. He cleared his throat, glancing at the baby's crib a few feet away, framed by candles. "We gather tonight for family unity," he began, voice calm. Then he paused, looked at me, and lowered his tone so the daylights would hear. "You're too bitter to be around the baby. Your voice sours the air, your history haunts every room." A hush dropped. The mic trembled in his hand. I opened my mouth to speak, to tell him how hard I loved him, but no sound came. He leaned forward, reasons dangling in the spaces between words. "We love you, but we need peace." That phrase stung like salt. Before I could absorb it, he flung the microphone toward me. It struck my forehead with a thud. In that moment, I realized not all wounds are meant to hide. Pain blossomed instantly. I staggered, fingers touching warm trickles of blood. The mic clattered to the stone path. Kylie stepped in, hand outstretched with tissues, but instead of dabbing the wound, she rubbed it harshly, smearing the blood across my skin. She said, low and cruel, "Don't stain the baby's vibe, Grandma." Laughter rippled among the watchers. Blood dripped onto the hem of my dress. I stood stock still, the sound of candles flickering, everything slowed. A single drop slid down to my hand. That was the moment. Inside me, a quiet voice whispered, "Enough." I turned away from the circle, uncrossed the boundary of stones, and walked past stunned faces. In my mind, a map of silent suffering unfolded. Years of being erased, ignored, bald insults disguised as kind concern. That mic hitting me, the blood, was the final refusal to remain invisible. I found a seat behind a potted fern, drew my phone, and spoke into it softly. "Ellison, activate plan now." My lips pressed tight. The edges of the circle flickered with shadows. They would discover soon enough that blood isn't just pain, it's a warning. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. There was a time when my hands knew the weight of hope in the shape of a child. I worked the graveyard shift as a nurse for over 20 years, my badge dull, my shoes worn to the sole, my name often mispronounced but my touch unforgettable. My patients were often children from the back roads of Colorado, underfed, underloved, fighting fevers on cots too small. I wiped their brows, changed IVs in the dark, whispered lullabies into medical tubes. Some made it, some didn't. But I stayed. I'd return home after dawn, shoulders bent, hands aching from too many syringes and too little sleep. I'd pour cereal for Nathan with trembling fingers, brush the hair from his eyes, and kiss his forehead before crawling into bed. I missed a lot of daytime things, school assemblies, soccer games, field trips. I was always on shift. Once, in 3rd grade, Nathan came home quiet. I asked how his science fair had gone. He shrugged and whispered, "Everyone's mom came." Then, lower, they asked me if mine was dead. I opened my mouth, closed it, and just reached for his lunchbox. That night I cried over lasagna I forgot I'd left in the oven too long. It tasted like guilt. Kylie came into our lives years later, with her blonde braid and lemon-scented promises. When they moved in together, she said, "Your mom's home smells like old bleach and broken clocks." I laughed politely, but something in her tone stayed. Once, she told her friends, "Her place smells like cleaning fluid from another decade. It's hard to breathe in there." They laughed. I heard it from the hallway. I had a music box in my room, a wooden keepsake from my teenage years. Inside was a piece I composed at 17, a lullaby called Sky Without Ceiling. I had written it for my future children, back when I still believed tenderness could be recorded and replayed. Nathan found the sheet music when he was in high school, read a few bars, and tossed it in the trash. I found it hours later, stained with pasta sauce and milk. When I asked him why, he said, "It's outdated, doesn't match the vibe of my room." I didn't argue. I folded the paper and kept it anyway, inside a first aid kit, hidden among the gauze and saline. When Nathan got into college, the tuition bill arrived like a freight train. He hadn't told me the full cost. He was embarrassed, but I saw it in his eyes. I drained 2 of my retirement CDs and transferred the money to a private account linked to his school. Anonymous. He never asked where it came from. He just smiled and said, "I handled it." Every time he landed an internship, a scholarship, a travel grant, he'd post online, "Self-made. No handouts." I'd like the post, fingers stiff, smile fading. I didn't need the credit. I just wanted the connection. But slowly, he erased the bridge between us, one success at a time. And yet, I kept giving. Birthday checks, loan repayments I never asked for, groceries dropped off during pandemic lockdowns. I'd text, "Do you need masks?" and get a thumbs-up emoji in reply. The distance grew not in miles, but in meaning. My home, once full of crayon drawings and late-night cocoa, became a place they visited only when they needed a quiet weekend out of the city. When they brought the baby, they wiped surfaces twice. Kylie once whispered to the infant, "Don't touch anything, sweetie. Grandma's place is dusty." I remembered when Nathan was 6 and had pneumonia. I slept upright beside his bed for 4 nights, counting his breaths. I spoon-fed him broth and wiped his nose with my shirt when tissues ran out. Back then, my scent was safety. Now, it was a warning. One Thanksgiving, Kylie brought gluten-free stuffing and told me, "We'll eat only what we bring, just to be safe." She meant from me. She didn't say it aloud. She didn't need to. I wasn't invited to their gender reveal. I saw it on Instagram, smoke cannons, a perfectly framed backyard, matching outfits. A stranger commented, "Where's the grandma?" Kylie replied, "She's not into parties." I was at home that day, with a lemon cake cooling on the counter, blue and pink balloons taped to my ceiling. No one came, but I endured. I endured because love had taught me how to serve in silence. Because in nursing, in motherhood, you often give more than you get. But there's a difference between sacrifice and being dismissed. Sometimes I wonder what might have happened if I had said no earlier. No to the gaslighting, no to being erased gently, no to silence. But back then, I still believed they would see me, eventually. Eventually came later than I thought. And when that microphone struck my forehead, the blunt metal of Nathan's indifference drawing blood from my skin, I knew the past couldn't be rewritten. But the future? That was mine to design. I was moved that day to the quiet room, a small chamber at the very end of the hallway, its walls thin, its light dim, its door incapable of silence. The soft hum of conversation, laughter, footsteps echoed through the plaster, penetrating every syllable I wished were mine. I lay on the narrow bed, hearing the distant rattle of silverware, the flutter of napkins, the polite greetings of guests in the living room. Earlier, I had walked past the family room and noticed the change. The photographs lining the shelves had been replaced. Gone were the pictures of me blowing out birthday candles, of me hugging Nathan at Christmas, of me seated at Thanksgiving with his first plate. Instead, the framed walls held only Nathan, Kylie, and Noah, smiling in curated poses under perfect lighting. I saw Kylie's reflection in the glass. She adjusted one frame, smoothed her hair, nodded. Later, when a guest rang the doorbell, Kylie greeted her at the threshold. The guest peered into the hallway and asked about me. Kylie replied smoothly, "She's a house guardian. She lives here, yes, but she's not part of us." The guest nodded awkwardly and moved on inside. I bit my lips. The words, "not part of us," echoed in my soul. That evening, I heard a whisper behind the walls. Noah's small voice. "Why Grandma isn't in the family pictures?" Kylie, from another room, answered, "She doesn't fit our brand now, sweetie." I froze, clinging to silence. The brand had erased me. When I mustered the courage, I went to the corner, the hall closet turned makeshift storage, and saw boxes of my belongings. Letters, old sweaters, journals, even the wooden music box I treasured. There were bare shelves where books used to stand. I recognized the handwriting on one box, reserved for removal. My jaw clenched. I touched the edge of a box and felt the ridged spine of an old notebook. Inside, I saw my own pen strokes, poems, names, dates. Next to that, a knitted shawl. My fingers traced its pattern. A scarf I had once knitted for Nathan, a soft blue cable knit, lay folded, limp. I picked it up, inhaled. It smelled of cedar and memories that once filled a home. I'm not certain when I realized the full weight. They were not just excluding me from photos. They were erasing me altogether. Across the corridor, I heard footsteps. I pressed my ear to the doorframe. In the living room, Kylie's voice. We streamlined space. Old chapters don't belong in the story we're building. Nathan's muffled agreement. Then, music, laughter. The household continued. But I sat in my little room, diminished. That night, I stared at my reflection in a small mirror mounted on the door. The wound from the mic strike had faded to a thin red line. But when I touched it, the pain flared. I stared harder. What good is survival when you are made invisible by your own flesh? I breathed deep. I whispered into the darkness. I will write myself into the light again. I arrived in the garden under strings of lantern light, fresh air and night wind together. Kylie had arranged stones in concentric rings, burning incense, soft chanting music, diffuser scents of sage and lavender. The guests, some influencers, some wellness coaches, stood around in flowing white garments. I was invited to step into the central ring, surrounded by candles. A healer, a tall woman in linen robes, approached me, voice low. She spoke. We release negative ancestral energy. We clear the old wounds. We free your spirit from burdens you did not ask for. The candle's glow flickered, shadows dancing on faces. My wound at my forehead still tingled from the mic strike, a faint smear of dried blood. I felt every look. Kylie held up a board. A list titled, Energy Anchors to be Cleansed Today. She walked it slowly to the front. The list contained names, some friends, some past grievances, and, in bold letters, Clara Bancroft, high toxic. The crowd drew in breath. She pinned a card under my name, discard. Whispers snaked through the circle. Nathan stepped forward, raising his voice. From now on, only supervised visits. The statement landed heavy. My heart thudded. Guests shifted, avoiding my eyes. A man clapped lightly. Kylie smiled with satisfaction. I stood in the circle as faces turned to stare, some sympathetic, many curious. The wound on my forehead felt hot. I sensed cameras behind records, phones ready. I saw Kylie's lips curl in a mocking smile, Nathan's jaw firm. Then I untied my shawl, flicked it aside. I took one step backward, then another, out of the circle. Silence fell. The healer gasped. Kylie's face froze mid-pallor. Nathan's eyes narrowed. As I passed each guest, I heard faint applause, sarcastic, congratulatory. They cheered the exile of their own mother. Kylie laughed. Nathan smirked. The detox phase is over. With that, he raised his gaze above me, arms folded. The music dimmed, the candles flickered. I did not cry. I only walked. But in that silent walk, the ground beneath me felt steadier than it had in years. I waited until the house was quiet. The candles in the garden long since extinguished, the laughter and music gone, replaced by the hush of night. I slipped silently from my quiet room, down the hallway that smelled faintly of lavender and old stone. At the very end was the storage door, the one they thought I no longer used. I pulled my shawl tighter, stepped inside. Inside that secret room were decades of my life. Dusty file boxes, unopened ledgers, brass keys hanging on hooks, old certificates. I set a small lamp on a crate and lit it. The shadows stretched. I sorted through a stack of documents. The deed to our mountain home, the old title for the land parcel I bought in 1998, the certificates of stock for EduTech Innovations, corporate agreements, trust documents, and a folder marked Clara's Fund, Beneficiary. I opened the trust folder. There was the contract Nathan and I had signed when he was a teenager, not public, tucked away in my desk drawer. It stated that if Nathan, as beneficiary, ever violated certain moral covenants, Words like toxic behavior, emotional abandonment, or severance of family ties, then control of the fund would revert to me. All these years, I was holding the key, and he never knew the door was mine to open. He never knew it existed. He never suspected. Next, I studied the EduTech stock certificates. Years before, when Nathan was in med school, I quietly converted the tuition fund 300 Kelvins into shares in EduTech via a shell company I controlled, named Aurora Trust LLC. The shares had quietly grown in value as EduTech's mission expanded. Nathan thought the tuition fund was his. I knew all along it was still mine, cloaked under corporate ownership. Beside those stacks lay printed transcripts of text messages. Kylie telling her friends, "She stained the aura of this home. She's poison disguised as love." A file of Nathan messages, "You deserve to be cut off." Even a video file, the mic striking my forehead, the flash photography capturing the moment. I plugged the USB into my laptop, watched the clip, felt the sting of betrayal once more. But now it was proof. I and my lawyer, Ellison, had worked in secret. He had compiled a dossier of evidence, redacted versions ready for court filing. The trust contract, the corporate structure of Aurora Trust, the messages, the video, the stock agreements, all pointing one direction: the fund was legally retractable. With trembling fingers, I drafted an email to Nathan and Kylie. Subject: They canceled my fund, so I activate mine. You canceled my trust, terminated my rights. By our contract, you violated moral covenants. Effective immediately, control and distribution of the fund revert to me. Expect formal notice. Clara. I attached the trust contract, the stock agreement, and a screenshot of their messages. I double-checked before hitting send. The clock ticked, the silence was heavy. Then I stashed the documents, locked the secret room, and returned to my room. My heart pulsed. The war was no longer silent. The tools had been assembled. The accusation was delivered. Now, I would reclaim what was mine. I lay awake, the lamp's glow flickering on the ceiling. In its light, I saw strength, not bitterness, but justice. And tomorrow, they would see it too. I awoke to a message from Ellison. Notice sent. Control shift is effective. I sat in my room, heart hammering. It had begun. By mid-morning, Nathan's inbox flooded. Ellison's formal notice declared, due to breach of moral covenant as defined in the trust contract, Nathan no longer has rights to withdraw from the tuition fund. The legal basis was airtight, the contract I held secretly. The email read, effective immediately, all withdrawal privileges revoked, fund control reverted to Clara Bancroft. Almost simultaneously, his bank began sending alerts. Withdrawal denied, account access locked pending review. His payments for school loans were declined. He frantically phoned, but the lines cut. The institution managing the educational fund replied, requests cannot be processed, account under legal hold. Next, I activated the corporate mechanism I had prepared. The stocks in EduTech Innovations, held by the shell company Aurora Trust LLC, automatically transferred voting shares to me. Nathan lost his executive seat. The board meeting that afternoon recognized the transition. Clara Bancroft now held majority control over EdTech. Nathan's proposals were rejected, his access revoked. The empire of future education he thought to occupy was now under my name. That evening, I held a media event in our garden. Candles lit, camera crews, live stream setup. I played the video. Kylie mocking my energy. Nathan raving about, cutting off the bitterness. The moment the mic struck me, I read aloud emails. You deserve to be cut off. She stained our aura. The guests gasped. Reporters scribbled. Local news outlets caught fire. Social media hashtags, number Mother Reclaims Fund, number Son Loses Voice, number Clara Promise, trended across Colorado. Headlines blared. Elderly mother reclaims her power, son silenced legally. Opinion columns debated fairness, generational disrespect, power in families. Down in the hospital where Nathan works, a colleague forwarded the headlines. Doctor who abandons mother loses voice, story trending. Patients murmured. Donors in his program paused contributions. His credibility wavered. I stood by the stage, a slender figure in the glow, bearing the wound on my forehead like a mark of resolve. The cameras recorded every frame. I didn't look vindictive, I looked steady. I said, "They canceled me." So I activated what was always mine. The applause rose. Nathan's world began shrinking. His contacts cooled, his funding pulled back. Kylie's followers posted criticism. How could she disown Grandma? How long until you lose everything else, Nathan? The public sided with the woman who fought quietly. That night, I walked through my halls they once tried to erase me from. In the darkness, I smiled. I had reclaimed not just a fund, but voice, dignity, and legacy. I did not sleep. Rain tapped at the windows all night, a steady drumbeat against my thoughts. Around midnight, I heard a knock, soft but insistent. I rose, walked through dim halls, opened the door. There stood Nathan, drenched umbrella collapsed in one hand, eyes red, coat heavy with water. Lightning flashed behind him. He swallowed. He said, voice trembling, "Mom, I didn't know. I'm sorry. Can we restore the fund? Please, I'll do anything." His breath curled in the cold air. I stood there, in the doorway, the scar on my forehead visible in the porch light. I did not invite him in. I looked at him, silent, for long seconds. Then I said, "You meant every word when you canceled me." The rain coursed down his collar. Behind him, little Noah appeared, in pajamas, clutching a stuffed bear. He squinted through the darkness. "They say Grandma is bitter," he said in a small voice. "I say she is strong." I felt the weight of that moment press on Nathan's face. Inside, Kylie's voice broke over a live stream. She had turned on her phone. "Mom, I was blinded by optics and fear. I'm sorry," she said with tears welling. Her apology played across screens. Simultaneously, messages and video copies were flooding Instagram, clips of Kylie mocking me, telling friends I stained the aura. Comments poured in, "Ungrateful daughter, mother reclaimed dignity." The court of public opinion had turned. Nathan's phone lit with calls. One was from the hospital administration. His voice crackled. "Dr. Bancroft, we've received complaints regarding your ethics. We may have to review your contract." Another from a client, "I'm withdrawing funding until scandal clears." His empire, built on appearance, reputation, was unspooling. I closed the door behind me and invited them into the living room. Water dripped from Nathan's shoes onto the rug. I gestured to a chair. He, Saturday Kylie, stood by the archway, teary, shoulders slumped. I spoke calmly. "The fund is no longer yours to ask about. Effective immediately, it will be renamed Clara Promise Fund, and it will serve children who have no voice, no access, no promise. Noah, as my first beneficiary, you will receive the first scholarship from it." I paused, letting the words settle in the room. "You asked to restore the fund. I restore nothing to you. I redirect it to others." Nathan opened his mouth to argue, but Noah tugged at his sleeve, whispered, "Daddy, stop." That moment echoed louder than any verbal fight. Kylie sobbed. "I never meant to hurt you." Her voice cracked under the weight of her own exposure, but the world had seen her cruelty now. Her brand, her followers, her curated image, all turned. Nathan bowed his head, his posture small. He realized that every act, every word, every cancellation had consequences. The calls came again. Kylie's live stream ended with a final tearful, "I lost my mirror when I lost respect for you." The crowd outside, behind windows, clicked shutters. He rose and faced me. "Mom, I want to rebuild. Please, let me help manage the scholarships." I shook my head. "No, Nathan, you need to rebuild yourself first. This fund is not your lifeline, it is mine now." Noah moved to me, slipped his hand into mine. His presence quieted the tension. Nathan looked between us, regret and loss mingling in his eyes. Kylie backed away. The thunder rolled. The rain fell harder. I walked past them to the window, gazed out at the garden drenched in silver. I felt the air clear, as though a storm had passed inside me. In that night's silence, Clara Promise Fund was no longer an idea. It was living truth. I had not humiliated them. I had held them accountable. For once, I used my strength instead of my silence. Nathan and Kylie left by the front door. They did not turn back. Noah stayed with me. I tucked him under a blanket. I sat with him at the kitchen table, warmed by lamplit mugs. Outside, the rain slowed to a hush. I whispered to myself. They said I was too bitter, but I made that bitterness into purpose. I opened the doors of the old library wing of our home and turned it into Clara's Financial Clarity, a weekly class for older adults who never learned how to arrange wills, manage small investments, understand trusts. I cleared shelves to make space, put up a whiteboard, laid out pamphlets about power of attorney, Social Security benefits, preserving assets across generations. People came, gray-haired women in sweaters, retired men with trembling hands, immigrants who never had formal training. They sat in folding chairs, notebooks open, eyes eager to learn. On the morning of the scholarship ceremony, I stepped out onto the front lawn. The sky was pale gold. I wore a simple dress, soft blue, with the faint scar on my forehead, hidden by a strand of hair. Guests gathered on folding chairs, students in caps, neighbors, reporters. A banner read, Clara Promise Fund, Scholarship Awards 2025. Noah stood beside me, small in a suit too big. I rose to speak. This fund is born of a promise I made to myself, that bitterness would not rule the rest of my life. Today, we give hope. 10 young Coloradans, from towns where opportunity is scarce, will receive scholarships to pursue education. I looked over the list of names. First one was Noah Bancroft. The audience's breath caught. Nathan stood in the back. He held his umbrella, water dripping from his coat. He had come, but remained in the shadows, not daring to cross forward. His lip trembled. He did not speak. I motioned for Noah forward. He walked in small steps, cheeks pink. I handed him the first check and the certificate. He looked up at me, eyes bright. "Grandma," he whispered to the microphone, "I'm proud of you." My throat tightened. I smiled, voice steady. "And I'm proud of you." Then I called the other 9 students, greeted each by name, placed checks in trembling hands, encouraged dreams, study, return, lift someone else. Among them was a girl named Maria, whose father had died and mother worked 2 jobs. Another was Diego, whose school lacked funding for his science lab. Their faces glowed. Their families clapped. Reporters photographed. After the ceremony, people mingled under string lights. Some thanked me. "Thank you for believing in seniors. You empower us to protect our futures." Nathan lingered behind a row of chairs, caught by Mrs. Parker, one of our longtime neighbors, who nodded at me respectfully. Kylie approached slowly, eyes damp. She said, voice low, "Mom, I want to rebuild bridges." I nodded, measured. Not full reconciliation, but recognition. Later, in the gathering dusk, Noah and I walked to the huge window of the main hall. The last light of day poured through glass panes, casting golden beams across the floor. I placed his hand in mine. He tilted his head. "Grandma, you turned your pain into power." I felt tears burn the surface of my eyes. I whispered, scarcely louder than wind. They said I was bitter. I turned bitterness into legacy. I closed the window and stood there in silence, watching shadows lengthen. The mansion behind me held echoes of battles, but also new footprints, students, neighbors, gentle conversations. Clara's Financial Clarity would continue. Clara Promise Fund would help many. My name, once erased, was now an anchor of purpose. Nathan remained outside, watching through the glass, uncertain. Maybe tomorrow he will cross the threshold. But for tonight, I held Noah in my arms, walked through the rooms I once felt excluded from, and breathed fully. The bitterness had softened, becoming the foundation, and I had rebuilt not just a fund, but my own life. After the ceremony, I didn't return to the back hallway room with the gray walls and the little twin bed. I went upstairs, to the attic room I once painted lemon yellow, where I used to dream about writing music before life demanded I forget I had a voice. For the first time in over 40 years, I uncovered the little electric organ I'd kept, boxed away. I placed it near the window. My fingers were stiff, slow, but the melody still knew its way home. I painted the walls a soft, warm ivory. I hung my old sketches, the ones I'd hidden for fear of judgment. I ordered a reprint of my favorite jazz album and let it echo through the halls like it belonged. Every morning, I dabbed lavender oil on my wrists, not for Kylie's high-vibration rituals, but because I liked how it smelled back when I worked the night shift and needed comfort on the walk home. I signed up for a slow dance class at the community center, just for seniors. At first, I worried they'd laugh at me. But Mildred, a sharp-tongued 3-year-old in red sneakers, said, "Sweetheart, at our age, nobody's looking. So dance." So, I danced. And I laughed. I no longer sat at someone else's table, listening to people speak about me as if I weren't in the room. Now, I spoke. Now, I lived. I started writing, tiny stories, fragments of memory. The night I held a child's hand while he fought fever. The time I crocheted scarves for orphans in December. The look on a mother's face when I told her baby would survive. I wrote them down, not because anyone asked me to, but because no one could stop me anymore. Every week, I emailed a small newsletter called Clara's Clarity Chronicle to 20 new friends, mostly grandmothers, widows, caregivers, women who were tired of being invisible. One wrote back, "Your stories make me feel like I matter again." One afternoon, while cleaning out old boxes, I found a letter Nathan had written when he was 9. The paper was yellowed, and the ink had bled a little, but the words were still clear. "Dear Mom, thank you for staying up late to make my costume for the school play. You're the best mom, even when tired." I folded it neatly and placed it in a small wooden frame, not for forgiveness, but for remembrance. There was love once. There was truth once. I reclaimed my maiden name, Clara Esquivel. A name full of music, of soil, of dignity. I was not just a mother, not just a grandmother. I was also someone's daughter, a woman who endured and bloomed. I bought myself a red dress. Not to impress anyone, not to attend any dinner, just to remember how it felt to be bold. I drank hot cocoa at night, just because I could. There were too many winters when I skipped dinner so Nathan could eat. Now, I eat for me. Noah and I started a new tradition, 2 friends afternoon. Once a week, we bake, paint, or listen to old records together. One day, he asked, "Did it hurt, Grandma, when they forgot you?" I looked at him and said, "Yes, baby. But it stopped hurting when I remembered myself." I never expected an apology from Nathan. But I do hope he teaches his son that love isn't something you give conditionally. And me? I live now as someone who was once labeled bitter and turned it into sweetness. I am not the college fund. I am not the ghost in the hallway. I am not the wound on my forehead. I am Clara Esquivel. I am blood. I am music. I am memory. And now, I am mine. The days after the scholarship ceremony passed like a slow current, calm, steady, rebuilding. But inside me, something deeper was shifting. I had spent so long being the mother, being the provider, being the silent strength. But now, a new emotion began to press through the cracks. The possibility of belonging, the possibility of love, not conditional or transactional, but simple and real. One morning I awoke to birdsong and soft Colorado sunlight spilling in through the windows. Noah was still asleep. I looked at the musicals I had written, the paintings I had redrawn, the framed letter from young Nathan. They surrounded me with memory. Yet I felt something missing, a voice I had silenced in myself for decades. When I walked downstairs to the kitchen, I found a bouquet of wildflowers on the table. Daisies, columbine, mountain poppies. No card. I paused, heart fluttering. I soft-stepped to them and inhaled their scent. Earth, sun, rain. My fingers brushed velvet petals. I wondered who had left them. Over coffee, I saw a notification on my phone. A message from Dr. Marcus Lynn, a volunteer at the community clinic, a man I had once nursed for his daughter's chronic illness years ago. He wrote, "I'm glad you've come back into the light. If you ever want company for a walk or conversation, I'd be honored." My throat tightened. I hadn't thought of him in years, but his kindness had lingered. I left the flowers where they were and sent him a reply. I'd like that very much. Weeks passed. We met in a little park near my home. He wore a soft smile, wrinkles in his eyes. We walked slowly, neither rushing, talking about trivial things, the spring air, the wildflowers, how Noah's laughter echoed between trees. We shared silence comfortably, which surprised me. He didn't demand my story. He just listened. Sometimes he reached out and took my hand. It was gentle, unforced. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Marcus drove me home. He parked and turned to me. "Clara, may I see your scar?" I blinked. But the scar at my forehead was real, a map of pain and purpose. I raised my hair, revealed it. He touched it lightly, not staring, just acknowledging. Then he spoke. "You carry your battles visibly, but you also carry your survival. You deserve tenderness too." I swallowed, heart raw. That evening, I lay awake in my room, with paintings, music, scholarship plans around me, and a new feeling warmed my chest. Perhaps I was no longer just the fighter, perhaps I could be the beloved too. The next few days, Marcus started visiting regularly, sometimes to bring a pot of soup, other times to sit quietly in my living room. He asked about my classes, quizzed me on financial terms I taught others. His curiosity was kind, his presence steady. One late afternoon, we walked up to the veranda. The sky turned rose and gold. He stopped, looked at me, and gently said, "I want you to know, you are not alone." My eyes stung. I leaned my head on his shoulder. In that moment, I let the walls between us settle. I let something new grow. I told him about the mic hitting me, the wound, the scholarship, the fund. I told him of the times I watched others love easily while I learned love through silence and sacrifice. He listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't recoil. On a clear night, under a sky heavy with stars, Marcus and I walked along a path lit by lanterns. He paused and said softly, "May I kiss you?" My heart thundered. I nodded. His lips were careful, gentle, respectful. The world slipped away for a moment. No scandals, no legacy, no past wrongs, only two souls recognizing something precious between scars. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, moonlight brushing my face. I remembered the years I refused to ask for more from life. I remembered the nights when even a wish felt too bold. And now here I was, letting myself be seen in a new way. The next day, I taught my class, Clara's Financial Clarity. I looked out at the faces of older women, many resigned, many hopeful. I felt strength in me I hadn't known. I realized that love does not erase strength, it amplifies it. Later that afternoon, Noah came in, shining with pride. He held a card. It read, "To Grandma, who shines bright." He jumped into my arms. I smelled glue, crayons, childhood. I kissed his cheek, and when Marcus came to greet us, Noah grabbed his hand and waved. Grandma's new friend. Nathan stood watching us through the glass, guarded and unsure. But he saw that I had more than power now. I had joy. One evening, after dinner, Marcus brought me a small wooden music box. He wound it. It played "Sky Without Ceiling," the lullaby I composed long ago. Tears blurred my vision. He leaned forward. "You deserve every note you ever wrote." I closed my eyes and let that truth sink in. In the months that followed, our relationship grew in its own quiet way. We did not shout love. We built it in silence, kindness, daily presence. He never demanded I erase my past. He held my scars with respect. I walked around my home one day, touching walls I painted, glancing at certificates I earned, breathing in the letters and photos I reinstalled. I thought of Nathan, of Kylie, of Noah, of Marcus. My life was no longer a ledger of borrowed recognition. It was my own. That night, I sat by the big window, gazing out at a sky filled with stars. I whispered, "You said I was bitter, but I turned bitterness into legacy, and now, into love." And with that whisper, I closed my eyes and felt something bright open inside me. A life reborn, with possibility. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that silence remembers and that justice can bloom even from old scars, then I invite you to stay a while. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories for more true tales of dignity, betrayal, and quiet revenge told by the women who lived them. Because when a grandma speaks, the world listens. Until next time, take care of your elders and never underestimate the quiet ones.